Exactly. So that could be one of them.
Yeah, it's pretty valid.
Okay.
Yeah, and you think about like other mythical creatures like the snipe.
Yeah.
This guy that went off to Mongolia and the president of Mongolia or the prime
Andrews,
minister. Yeah. And he's saying, so I would love so very much if you could find evidence of the Mongolian death worm.
And sending him on a snipe hunt.
Yeah, exactly. They all probably had a great laugh about it afterwards.
Well, there's some creatures that actually do exist in nature that if we look at could potentially be a relative of or a candidate for what the death worm is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sicilians, which it's not the people from the country Sicily. This is a breed of creature.
It's spelled Caecili.
ANS.
ANS.
Yeah.
Not Sicilian.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's pronounced very similarly.
Yeah.
They're amphibians. They're somewhere between a snake and a worm. They're really small. Normally, they're only a couple inches long, but there are a couple that can get up to, I don't know, about 4 or 5 feet long. They got no legs. Their skin is smooth, and they live underground. They have itsy bitsy eyes, and occasionally they will come up above ground. And they've got a weird pointed head, which according to the stories, this thing doesn't have a discernible head.
Right.
So that's a problem. The other problem is that they tend to live in moist tropical areas.
Oh, that makes sense.
So they're an underground. They're very damp.
But I
not
think
a desert dwelling kind of critter.
Yeah, but God knows, many thousands and eons ago what the climate in the Gobi Desert was like. It could have at one time been a moist, lush jungle,
and
as the climate
changed.
changed.
You're stealing my thunder there, Joe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hold off on that because
Okay.
that's going to come up in a little bit.
Oh, I didn't know.
There's another theory down the
script.
line.
Yeah,
I did it to you last week. We've got Amphisibia, which is another kind of burrowing, legless, long-bodied creature. They're actually really similar to the Sicilian, except that they don't live in the same areas and they don't grow nearly as large, but they are another kind of weird little worm-like long critter. Mm-hmm. They have rings instead of scales, so kind of like the dune worms. They've got big rings as they go down their body.
Sure, yeah.
But again, they don't live in the right areas. There are actually, and this was something I found really interesting, and I thought kind of could be a match. Have you ever heard of legless lizards?
yeah.
No.
So legless lizards, they're not a snake. They look like lizards, but they either have smaller legs or there's no leg, maybe one set or the other is missing, or it's a little flap of skin where they've de-evolved the need for that leg, and so they're gone. And the problem with legless lizards is that they've got regular scales, but they do get big. So there's one called the glass lizard. It's a legless lizard. And it's really, really gross looking.
Oh, I'm looking at a picture right now.
Yeah, the glass lizard can get 5 feet or longer, and it's got these really weird grooves on both the left and the right side of its body that go all the way down its length. So the best way to describe it, it's got to look up the glass lizard, and you'll see, ladies and gentlemen, and then you'll curse me for having had to see this nightmarish creature, but. Legless lizards.
I don't think I'll even look at a picture of it.
Legless lizards would be a creature because they're a lizard that could live in the desert easily, but they've got scales and they've got an obvious head.
Yeah.
Because they're a lizard, so they've got a pointy tail and a kind of bluntish head. Lizards do. They're pointy, bluntish.
That doesn't rule them out entirely because after all, God knows when the last human being actually saw the Mongolian death worm.
Exactly.
And they might have been at a distance.
So it
didn't get a very accurate description.
I consider the legless lizard actually one of the top possibilities for what this is.
Okay.
The next one is it could just actually be a snake.
Yeah.
The stories talk about the fact that it spits a venom, which is very similar to cobras.
Yeah, they do that.
Cobras are really accurate with spitting the poison, and that poison really does not do good things to people. So they could be a snake. One of the other descriptions that you see of the Mongolian deathworm is that it's got the blunt ends, but it's actually got spiky protrusions on both the front and the back of it. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying how long these spikes are, so they're not like fantastically big things. They could just be little spiky ridges, but that's a lot like vipers. If you think about adders and vipers, they've got a lot of ridges on their heads, and that's something that they use to detect vibration in the ground and in the air.
Yeah.
So, again, this is very plausible that it just could be a really venomous, really shy snake.
That's true, yeah.
So somebody comes along and it startles it, and what does it do? It stands up and it spits venom at them and then burrows into the ground. And then the story just grows from there.
Yeah, so the electricity part of it maybe was tacked on later on.
Yeah.
But a place like the Gobi Desert, I could totally see a place like that having big, scary, poisonous snakes.
And
I'm not skeptical about that.
No, and I'm not at all. So,
no.
in snakes, there's a lot of varieties of snakes that are really shy.
This is also stealing your thunder, right? A little bit, because I know where we're headed in terms of theories. But, there is such a thing as an electric eel. And if the desert was once a huge sea, I don't know what... everything was once a huge sea, right? So, I guess in my mind, it's possible that it evolved into something more snake-like.
Yeah.
But also,
let's go there.
But as far as an electric eel going, evolving into this dryland variant that is the ability to store enough electrical energy to drop a herd of camels.
Oh well, obviously not
that
that, right? In my
unlikely.
mind, not to reveal what I think about this story too much, but in my mind, that's an obvious lie.
That bit is
Right.
easy to toss out the window.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, and let's run down that. We'll just jump ahead to that theory because this is the theory that I came up with on my own. So I admit that I'm grasping at straws, and I can't think of the phrase when you take loose bits of related data and draw a conclusion from them. But that's what I did to come up with this maybe possible theory.
Yeah, it's called making things up.
Okay. That's what I thought it was.
Okay.
According to legends of the region, what is now the Gobi Desert 100 to 200,000 years ago was a giant inland lake. And at some point, whatever landmass or geologic structure that was holding that lake in place gave way, and that lake drained. So the whole area no longer is full of water. Well, if it's a giant inland sea, it's going to have some kind of fish in it. So now let's step back to what Devin said about the electric eel. The electric eel is one of 6 different species that are on the planet that make electricity to shock, stun, kill prey or predators.
Right.
And they've all done so independently. And I did some research on it. It's really kind of interesting. They've all used the same gene.
Interesting.
Which is, it's very interesting. Unique, and yet they're all very like stingrays and all of that. They're electric rays, not stingrays.
So you're arguing in favor of intelligent design? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Saying there's
But what I'm saying,
toolkit?
what I'm saying here is, let's just say that in that inland sea, something like the electric eel, which by the way is not a fish. It's a lungfish. It breathes oxygen through its mouth. So electric eels have to come up and
That's
take
why they
air from
always
the
look
surface.
like they've made a bad pun, right?
Yes, exactly. So if there's something like a lungfish that can make electricity in this sea, and the sea doesn't just drain in one giant torrential outpour, it slowly drains out.
It dries out over eons.
Over
centuries, perhaps.
Yeah, over a couple of centuries or thousand years, these creatures, which already are air breathers, could slowly learn to adapt and burrow in the mud, and then when the mud went away, they went deeper into damper soil and sand down below to stay cool and moist, which would make sense when people say the thing only comes up when there's a heavy rain.
Yeah.
Because it's got to come all the way to the surface to get air.
Yeah.
And it would only be when the ground was super wet that they would be able to conduct enough electricity to send that to somebody who was standing near it. Do you see where I'm heading with this?
Yeah.
I know
So-
I'm totally grasping at straws on this one, but I'm like, okay, well, I could see.
And I guess the
rationally
other
how that
and the
could
other
happen.
argument would be if it's seen around a tree needs water.
Yeah.
Right, so there's definitely
yeah.
like deeper wells, and I don't know if there's something about the combination of those two that means that there's more moisture or whatever
To support both of them?
be able to support both of them in the middle of this desert.
Or maybe it just likes munching on, that little parasitic plant. Too.
Right.
Oh, the little
Yeah.
thumb.
The,
Yeah.
the
The
thumb
little
plant.
desert thumb.
Desert thumb. Yeah.
I think I obviously don't understand how evolution works that well.
And again, I'm not gonna say that I understand evolution clear enough to say this could happen, but just
it's a vague idea.
One
Yeah.
and two and three, I could see how that could happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely a possibility.
Yeah.
But
It is.
it's still, you'd think that somebody would have come across one of these things.
Unless that they always live that far down in the sand because it's nice and cool and damp. And it's only when it's heavy rains that they come out. I mean, I don't know. Again, I realize I'm grasping at straws on this.
Oh, yeah. Well, whatever.
Our final theory?
That's it.
It's actually an extinct creature.
Oh.
Okay, people have been living in that region for eons,
Yeah.
as Joe said. So it is quite possible that there was something similar in one form or another to the death worm that was in the region. And it died out, either through, evolution made it run into extinction, or people freaked out and they hunted it, or they killed it out of fear, or whatever the case may be. It may be that there was a creature like that at one point there, and it's no longer there, but the story is stuck around.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
That's also entirely possible.
Yeah, that's possible. Although, I would think they would have come across a skeleton because there's been a lot of digging in the Gobi Desert. I mean, there's a lot of dinosaurs' bones buried in that desert, and there's been a lot of expeditions, a lot of big old dinos have been dug up out of the Gobi.
Well, but
And
if
they
it's a
think in the
little
course of
creature, though, it might have really fine bones that just get broke up really easy.
Yeah, possibly.
Think about
Or
how
no
fine fish bones
bones.
are.
Or no bones.
Could have
Yeah.
no bones. Could
Do
be
worms,
some sort of
do worms-
invertebrate.
Worms don't have.
No, they're an
bones.
invertebrate.
I mean,
They have
yeah.
no bones, and if it had some kind of carapace or shell to it, that would potentially break down if it was like an insect of some kind.
Yeah, or even no. I mean, I don't know that a worm would leave a fossil unless it was under like a really, really.
Unless
the
it was
right
in the mud or something like
circumstances.
that.
If it dies in the
then-
mud and it winds up getting preserved.
Yeah, but if
leave
it's
a
not in the
fossil.
mud, there's no bones. It's just like basically flesh that decays and.
And if there's if there's not hard enough ground to pack around it to leave the impression, then we have no impression of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, so
Seems possible we just haven't found it yet.
I'm sure there's, I'm sure like, for every living creature on the planet today, I'm sure there's probably 10 or 100 that have gone extinct.
Yeah.
So there could have been something
Yeah.
like that.
Very simply.
Yeah.
Well, what do you guys think? What's your favorite theory?
My favorite theory is that it's probably just a local legend. Although, I think that they can easily put a bunch of just oversized rat traps around some of those plants and nab some of those things. I think that might be called for.
That is such an effective means. I'm sure that'll totally work. Those sticky traps.
Yeah, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah, roach motels. No, I'm talking about rat traps, the kind that go snap. That kind.
With the cheese and everything.
Yeah, and then the best thing about it is you tie you wire like a cable to it and then stick a like a steel rod into the ground to ground it. So you'll totally drain it of its electricity so it can't zap you.
Devin, what's yours?
I'm not a fan of that at all. I like your theory, actually.
Really?
The like weird, slow lungfish evolution situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like it.
I personally
Like it.
Though mine is fun, I think it's probably just a really shy snake. I have the feeling that it's a very shy snake. A lot of the quote-unquote illustrations that you see of it, I mean, these are people just making up what they want. They're things that are reminiscent of dune or tremor worms sticking out of the sand. You can't see its bottom half because it's sticking out. And there are snakes that burrow and then pop their heads out and look around. And I could totally see somebody seeing that from a distance and it's spitting or freaking out and burrowing back in having no idea and starting a story.
That's fair, yeah.
That's kind of why I think, that's why I lean towards a snake.
I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's snakes in the Gobi, though. And the thing about it is the locals know those snakes, and they're probably not going to mistake
Not all
one
of them,
regular
though.
snakes for...
There's all kinds of new things that are found all the time because they just stay away from people. They're just so afraid, or not afraid, but they just instinctually stay away from people. And when you're in the desert, you're not walking by yourself. You're walking with a bunch of people, and critters, or machinery. You're gonna make a bunch of noise and vibration, which is a sign to hide.
Right.
But
Well, it's true that there are definitely creatures. We're still finding new species. So it's entirely possible that something like this exists. I doubt it's quite as
fantastical,
as scary and gross, and enormous and everything like that.
Yeah.
But
I tend
but
to agree.
there could be something. The basis might be some extremely venomous snake. That might be where it came from.
Well, if you have your own theory and you are welcome to share that with us, if you go to our website, thinkingsidewayspodcast.com, you can leave a comment on the website. All of the episodes, of course, are on the website, so you can listen to any of them there. Or if you prefer to download them, iTunes tends to be the primary avenue folks go through. Find us on iTunes, download, subscribe, leave us a comment and a rating. We love to hear from people for that. If you you forget to download a show and you realize one's come out, you can always go ahead and find us on Stitcher and just stream it over any mobile device. We are on Facebook, so we've got the Facebook page and the Facebook group. We're always sharing stuff on there. People seem to be enjoying it and having a good time, so you can track us down there, and anything you want to share, you can share right there as well. And, of course, we have our email address, which is thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. And you can send us an email with your thoughts. If you're a Mongolian deathworm and you want us to get the story straight, you can, if you figure out how to type, you can send us an email.
We're going to get emails that are just like... blah, blah, blah.
And then a follow-up angry email. Why is the keyboard on my computer melted after it sent you this message?
Sorry.
At the bottom of it, underneath Mongolian deathworm, says sent from my iPhone. Yeah, I know. They're everywhere.
I can see this happening.
The other thing about the Mongolian deathworms, if there are any of you out there, what I want to know is if you guys are so incredibly, scarily dangerous, why don't you all gang up and invade Ulaanbaatar? You can easily slaughter all the human inhabitants and have the whole city to yourself.
I don't even know where that's at.
Ulaanbaatar? That's Mongolia. That's the capital of Mongolia.
Okay, I figured it was in Mongolia, but I didn't know what to say.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool.
I think they should just team up and invade Russia.
Well, that'd be kind of cool.
They could.
Yeah.
But anyway,
all right. Yeah. So, what were we talking about?
we're moving on from that.
Oh yeah.
Because we have a couple of listener emails that we got that we wanted to share. We got a couple of good ones to share.
Oh well, as opposed to the usual nasty ones.
Yeah.
Exactly. Devin, you wanna read the first one?
Sure.
All right, let's hear it.
You guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay. This one is from Hunter. Hey, Hunter.
Was his name Hunter or is he a Hunter?
I don't know. He might be a hunter.
Okay.
But his name is Hunter.
Hunter. Okay.
He's also Hunter. He says, "Hey, Thinking Sideways crew. I am a butcher by trade and spend lots of times working in the cold. The time passes with hours of music and podcasts every single workday. By far, the most anticipated podcast is indeed the Thinking Sideways podcast. You are intelligent and witty, and most importantly, entertaining. Y'all managed to cover theories ranging from the mundane to the supernatural without seeming condescending to either side. Having 3 hosts with varying beliefs makes it a bit more interesting as well. I've been listening to the podcast since the Bygone Pipes, and ever since have tore through the backlog all the way to the Ghost Blimp. Are there any more from before then? If not, y'all really started strong with a higher production value than most starting podcasts. Either way, y'all seem to have no intention of letting off the throttle yet. Keep up the good work." Of course, he has his list of favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And his list of suggestions.
I saw that too.
I think he must be from the South somewhere.
I'm gonna guess.
Lots of y'alls.
Lots of y'alls.
And he just says, thanks a bunch for the highly intelligent entertainment.
Well, thanks, Hunter. We appreciate
thanks,
that.
Hunter.
Really
And
appreciate
Hope
it.
we're making your work a little easier.
Yeah, no kidding.
And thanks for being a butcher.
Yeah, I know. I like me my steaks. Let me tell you.
Yeah, and I don't want to have to cut them up for myself.
No, I don't want to butcher a cow. That's
Not really,
work.
That's not very fun.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
No, and I did have to let Hunter know that unfortunately, the Ghost Blimp is
That's
the first
the first one.
episode.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any hidden ones that we tried out in the beginning, unfortunately.
I'm glad that he thought that we started out at a pretty high production value, because I listen to those old ones every once in a while and think, wow, that sounds awful.
Yeah, and they're in black and white.
Yeah. With that like really annoying like vinyl like crackling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I discovered that it wasn't so awesome to put that in after a while.
Yeah.
No, I didn't put that in.
Huh.
Okay. Well, we've got another email that I wanted to read.
Okay.
And this is from Will, who actually is here in Portland. And
Oh.
Will was writing us saying that he'd had a chance to listen to the Jefferson Davis 8 episode.
Oh.
And he said he really enjoyed it. And as Will said here, the interview was solid, the subject matter was engaging, and the infographic was incredibly helpful trying to follow the spaghetti mess of a case, which is really a good description.
A lot
of
of names in there, a lot of weird internet.
Yeah. The podcast itself was really long, but there's nothing you can do about that with a bizarre case like this.
Truth.
Actually, I think the length is really the limiting factor on doing subjects like this regularly. 2 hours is a lot of time to commit to a podcast, no matter what the subject is.
I agree with that.
No.
And that's,
Absolutely.
And not all of our listeners are going to want to listen to 2 hours
No.
of us droning on.
No, and I remember we used to get mail pretty frequently that said, "Oh, well, you guys should do longer shows. You should do longer shows." And our shows have definitely gotten longer. We started out doing 20, 30-minute shows, and now we're, when
average about an hour.
Yeah, when we sit down and we say, "This is going to be a short show," and it ends up being, 45 minutes to an hour.
And I think that's a good place for us to be.
I agree, but I think that, every once in a while we end up doing this 2-hour-long marathon.
And it's always the topic.
Yeah.
It's the topic that drives it.
It's always just a weird anomaly.
But Will goes on here and he says, I do think it's really interesting to investigate stories like this. Unsolved, quote unquote, multiple murders in the area or in the era of CSI contrast sharply with the crime solved tidily in an hour on our television sets.
That's true.
You would think that, I'm sorry, what he says is, I think that what's really makes the Jefferson Davis 8 compelling is that 8 bodies should be enough to solve almost any mystery.
Well,
Agreed.
yeah, I sort of agree with that. But then again, if you look at stuff like the Green River Killer, I mean, there was like what 30 bodies
No,
in
but
that
how
case.
long of a period was that guy
That
over?
was over many years.
Yeah.
But I mean,
But no, you've both got a point. There's a lot CSI that is available today, and he does make a good point. Everybody expects now, I'm going to go do this, and the CSI is going to solve it in an hour and a half.
Well, it's that joke, right? Is the zoom in enhance.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, we can take an image that has like 8 pixels in it, and we can somehow get a beautiful.
I can run an algorithm.
We can run an algorithm and get
And
a
everybody
beautiful
always-
VGA image out of that. Yeah.
Everybody always forgets the reflection. Better check the reflection.
Check the reflection
You
in his
can see him
retina.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know.
Yep, totally works.
And we forget about that.
Oh, I always do when I'm committing crimes.
I know.
I'm always
forget
not
about
looking for the mirrors, and that's why I get busted.
I know.
Yeah, but anyway, with the Jeff Davis 8, I think the thing is too is that murder is typically the easiest crime to solve because there's usually somebody that's got a big Jones for the other, for the murder victim, and so it's usually pretty easy to figure that one out. But when it's a random thing like a serial killer, for example, which this very likely is, then it's not so easy to solve, unfortunately.
No, unfortunately not.
Or it could be a massive conspiracy of criminals and the police too. So maybe they are easy to solve, but the police just don't feel like doing it. I don't know.
Could be. I don't know. Well, regardless, to Hunter and Will and everybody else who sent us emails in this week that we got, thank you very much. We do appreciate that.
Yeah.
It
thanks
is,
for the
however,
good suggestions, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for filling up our thing.
Our
again.
backlog
Yeah.
or the hopper is
The
full,
list,
as
yeah.
they say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just put a bunch of them in there this
That's good
this
because
week.
we
It's like,
needed them.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more mysteries. That's
More
a mysterious
mysteries.
planet.
All right. Well, in the spirit of trying to keep this under an hour, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up this week, guys. So, hope you enjoyed the little death worm. Don't go looking for one, and we will talk to you next week.
Yeah, if you're in the Gobi Desert in June or July and suddenly a big thunderstorm comes rolling up, get the hell out of Dodge. That's all I can say. So, anyway, goodbye.
We're going to wiggle on out of here.
Thinking Sideways is not brought to you by this actually kind of nice hotel room that I'm staying in right now. Instead, it's brought to you by Bosch Season 3. Amazon's acclaimed crime series Bosch is back for a third season. For Detective Harry Bosch, solving crime isn't a job. It's an obsession that can claim your soul. After a long search for his mother's killer leads him to a police cover-up, Bosch now finds himself implicated in the death of a serial killer he's investigating. Sounds like one of our episodes. Starring Titus Welliver as Bosch and based on a best-selling novel by Michael Conley. Stream Season 3 on Amazon Prime starting April 21st.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't get it.
Approach the aliens. You must unlearn what you have learned. I don't know.
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Thinking Sideways. I am Joe, joined as always by
Steve
and
Devin.
And we're here for another cool mystery. This one from the lovely country of Italy.
The motherland.
Yeah, that's right, Devin's motherland, and Devin's been indispensable in pronunciation for this episode. So
That's like literally all I've given to this episode.
Pretty much. The rest of it's been kind of negative, like, oh, are you kidding? We're doing this one.
Yeah. Not interested.
Now, this one's about a serial killer who roamed the streets of Florence in the 1980s. You may have heard of him. But before I talk about it, word of warning, there's some really kind of disturbing mutilation here that a lot of you will find disturbing, and because really you should, because it is.
And if little ears are around, probably should save it for later.
Yeah.
Earmuffs, kids, for the next hour. Just earmuffs.
Yeah, there you go.
Have you seen the script? It's going to be 2 hours.
You're right.
No, I'm going to talk fast. Don't worry about
17
that.
days later.
No, I'm going to talk really
One pair of
slow.
pants later.
Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about murder and mayhem. We're talking, of course, about an Italian serial killer, so who else could we be talking about but the monster of Florence?
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, this is a big one. And by the way, this was suggested by Paolo. Paolo, thanks very much. I assume you must be our other Italian listener. There's Luigi, and now there's you. Mm-hmm. So, hey, dude, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. Hope you're still listening, by the way. But the monster, there have been other Italian serial killers, by the way, and some pretty good ones, but the monster is really the star.
Infamous.
Oh, he's huge. He's Jack the Ripper. He's the Italian Jack the Ripper, and which always gets the public's attention. The other thing about him was he was really brazen in the way he operated. I mean, he would go and kill people like right next to a road and stuff in view where a car could just drive on by. He's mutilating a corpse, you know. He was pretty bold.
Yeah.
In that regard, he makes me think of like the Texarkana Moonlight Murders.
Yeah, kind of like that, except a lot more sick and twisted.
Well, I was just talking about being willing to do it near a road and all of that.
Oh yeah,
no fear.
Oh yeah, for sure. The monster has a much bigger body count, though.
True.
A lot bigger. And another thing about him that still captures the attention of people is that he never got caught, which means there's a pretty good chance that he may still be walking around among us today.
Yeah.
Which is a little scary. Creeps me out.
Yeah.
That's why I don't go to that country.
Yeah, I stay away from Italy. In all, the monster killed between 14 and 16 people that we know of, and there's a little dispute about one set of murders there, which we'll talk about. And that's not a record, of course, but it's still a pretty respectable number.
Respectable, is that the word that you're...
Yeah, respectable.
Notable?
Notable?
Yeah,
it's not respectable, though.
But, yeah, well...
let's just, I mean...
hopefully people know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The bulk of the murders took place between 1981 and 1985, but there was also a 1974 murder that was connected. And then in 1982, after 6 people had been killed, another connection was made to a 1968 double murder, which, if you include that, makes 16 murders all in all. So I'm going to start with the first murder first.
take this chronologically,
Yeah.
as we're wont to do.
Yeah, so this happened August 21st, 1968. The murderees were Antonio Lobianco and Barbara Locci, who were having sex in the front seat of Antonio's Alfa Romeo. Barbara's son, Natalino Mele, was in the back of the car asleep. So that's a little weird.
The Italians for you.
I guess. I think even for the average Italian, that's probably a little weird.
Yeah, no, it is.
A little background on the whole thing, because this is kind of an important one of the murders. Barbara was married to a Sardinian immigrant named Stefano Mele. Barbara herself was Sardinian, and her marriage to Stefano was apparently arranged. He was 20 years older than her and apparently very unintelligent, from what I've heard. And I guess that he was not quite her romantic ideal because she really screwed around on him a lot. And although later reports said that he actually didn't mind, he was actually kind of into it. So
Like to be cuckolded.
apparently Barbara's latest boyfriend was Antonio Lobianco, which is why they were together. Antonio was a bricklayer, a very recent Sardinian immigrant himself. On the night of the murder, Barbara Locci had a date with Antonio, which involved first going to see a horror movie, and then heading up into the hills for a little lovers' lane romance. And as I mentioned before, Barbara's son, Natalino, was along for the whole date. Barbara was not the mother of the year.
No.
Not at
Well,
all.
it's better than leaving him alone home.
I don't know. Taking your 6-year-old kid to see a horror movie, that seems a little bit...
Depends
Well,
on the
horror
horror
movies
movie.
of the 60s,
I mean, like
actually,
Creature of the Black Lagoon, like you would take your kid to see that.
maybe. I guess it depends. I can see where some kids would be a little, at that age, might be a little traumatized.
But he might not have been.
Well, he was traumatized by later events.
Probably.
But, yeah, we'll talk about
Yeah.
that here in a second. And also something about Italian culture, probably most of you have heard this, people tend to live at home until they get married. And often even after they get married, they still live at home. But that makes it kind of tricky to have romance, if you know what I'm
little
talking
adult
about.
time.
Yeah, and so...
Well, you know, a lot of Italians are Catholic,
there's that too.
so that helps in the living at home situation.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Just saying.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, luckily for the youth of Italy, somebody invented the car, and then about 5 minutes later, somebody else figured out that you can have sex in cars.
Yep.
And so on any given evening, but especially on the weekends, the hills around Florence, Italy, were full of little dinky Fiats and Alfas with bumper stickers that said, "Don't come knocking if it's rocking," in Italian.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, there was lots of that going on. And of course, that spawned its own weird little subculture of guys that were called Indians by the locals.
They were the voyeurs.
The voyeurs who skulked around with binoculars,
Peeping Toms.
and night vision devices, and
listening devices.
video cameras, and spied on all these young couples having sex.
Which is just weird in its own way.
Yeah, there was, like I said, a whole network of these people
Yeah.
up there. So what Antonio and Barbara were doing really was not at all unusual, except for perhaps the kid in the back seat.
But also maybe not that.
Maybe not even. I don't know.
Who knows?
Maybe have the whole family in the back seat. Probably not
knows?
mom and dad, I hope, because that's the whole reason you're in a car to begin with, right?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, they drove up a dirt road. They were actually outside Florence city limits to the west. They found a nice little parking spot next to a stand of cane and proceeded to let nature take its course. And little Natalino got a nice biology lesson.
Well, he was asleep in the back, right?
If he was asleep. Supposedly he was asleep.
I don't know. 6-year-olds can often sleep through kind of anything.
Well, I guess that's true, yeah. But what, of course, Antonio and Barbara didn't know is that somebody was lurking in the cane next to the car.
Dun dun dun.
If it was corn, I wouldn't have been surprised.
No, not corn. One of the rear windows of the Alfa was rolled down. It was a warm August night, and at that time, of course, nobody was all that worried about serial killers. They would be one of these days, but not quite yet. Somebody came out of the cane, tiptoed over to the car, stuck a .22 semi-automatic pistol through the window, and started shooting. In the end, Antonio and Barbara were shot 4 times each. And little Natalino, did I mention that he was 6 years old? Was awakened by some blinding flashes and deafening gunshots. And he had quite a night. First the horror movie, then he sees copulation, and then he witnesses a double murder. So I mean, that's quite a night.
It definitely made an impression on him for the rest of his life. I would say that.
I would say.
And I would really
so.
say it was the last thing on that list is what made the biggest impression. But
I'm sure.